What terrifying confession has someone told you while drunk? I worked in a hospital and an alcoholic guy I knew from around my town came in. Of course he was very drunk, so he got a bed. He was homeless at this point. Just as he was starting to settle he screamed I slit his fucking throat. So I went up to him and asked him to settle, and he started telling me that he did it while in the army and could never forgive himself for it. Cried himself to sleep and died in the local park a few months later. It was me who did the confessing. When I was 18 I was sexually assaulted on a bridge in the middle of the night when I was all alone. My mum works in hearing and she had always told me to bite someone if I got into trouble. So I did. I bit into his neck until my teeth met again. He fell down, then I ran all the way home. A few weeks later I read in the news that a serial assaulter had gone to the hospital with neck wounds and later died. They'd drawn it down to him attacking someone and them acting in self-defense. I never told anyone until I got really drunk with my boyfriend last year and spilled it. He couldn't believe I'd kept that secret. A friend of mine died from a drug overdose. After the funeral a mutual friend of ours and I were getting drunk when he broke down crying. He asked me if I remembered the time when he and our dead friend told me about an accident that they'd witnessed where they saw a truck driver die. I told him I did. He then told me the most fricked up crap. He said that our friend ran up to the dying man and stole his wedding ring and that the man couldn't do anything but look up, terrified, at our friend as he was being robbed. I knew they were bad into drugs, but I never thought they could do anything like that. I grew up with them. They were like my brothers. I don't really trust anyone completely anymore. One of my best friends since middle school opened up to me the day we had our last day of high school. We had been partying all day, got off at 10 AM, but most people left at around 3 PM to go get ready for the seniors dinner and after party and whatnot. My friend stayed behind with our class president. I told him I'd pick him up for the dinner and left. When I got back, both were falling down drunk and in tears. A few years earlier, our class priest had lost his father. I take my buddy back to his house so he can get changed for the dinner, and on the way he tells me what happened. They had kept drinking when everyone left and eventually got to the topic of their dads. I had never met my friend's dad. He died and that was all I knew. I never knew how he died. It turns out my buddy's dad was a lawyer or something in the country he's from and was being extorted by a gang. When money started to run out, my buddy's dad sent the family to another country and told them he'd meet them there, that he had to finish some things up. A few weeks after moving they learned that he had been murdered by the gang. It completely fucked my friend up. We always used to drink heavily and whatever since we were in high school. For me it was just drinking. For my buddy it was numbing the pain. It was fucking shocking when he told me this and really made me understand him a lot more, why he acted how he acted. My mother's first husband, the sperm donor. I was 16. She had just walked out that same day and he got extremely drunk and told me that I was never supposed to have been born and that I should have died with my brother. I asked him what he meant by my brother, since I had no siblings, and he confessed to beating the shit out of my mother when she was pregnant and she ended up in the hospital. I was born, but my twin brother died in the womb. At the time my mother's English, she's Polish, was not good, so he claimed to doctors that she just fell down the stairs and threatened to have her deported and used me as blackmail if she ever told anyone. I followed her soon after. Once she had contacted me that she'd found a place to stay. I asked her if she had anything to tell me regarding my birth, and she told me the same story. I guess that explains why I felt like I was missing a part of myself all my life. I had a boyfriend who never talked about his past ever. He talked so fondly of his old state, but just about the actual state, never about people. If you treat a prod further he would just say, oh well, it doesn't matter anymore. We were young. I was about 19 and he was probably like 23 or so. He drank a shit ton all the time and whatever, we were young, so I just thought that it was normal and all in good fun. One night while shit-faced he started talking about how much he loved going into the woods and how he and his friends enjoyed playing on the rivers and streams in his old state. Then he got very sad and started to babble a bit incoherently. I heard him say something along the lines of his friend came to his house on meth and they were all also on drugs. Then more incoherently babbled, then something about his friend getting shot in the face. Then more incoherent babbling, then something about that is why he can never go home again. He was so desperately sad and missed his home very much. You could tell every time the topic came up. So yeah, I'm pretty sure he accidentally, or on purpose, killed a guy and was on the run. I have pointed my money on accident because he seemed so distraught. Boo, you never know. Also, you barely know anyone or anything at 19 years old. I often wonder if he ever had to face those demons. Not really a confession, but more of something no one ever told me. One time I was watching a movie with my mom, and she had had a few drinks. She wasn't wasted, but she was more talkative. Something in the movie made her talk about her life leading up to now. Apparently, a year or two before I was born, she was pregnant and suffered a miscarriage because the pharmacist gave her the wrong medicine, and they told her she probably wouldn't have children again. This was the first time in 17 years I had ever heard anything about this, so it came to a complete shock to me. My best friend disappeared for a while, presumably left town. We were both in our mid-20s. He came back after a month or so, and he'd take me out every night drinking and partying. I wondered how he was able to blow so much money on drugs and alcohol, but he wouldn't tell me. I saw him pay our tab one night and he must have had 12 or 15 grand on him. After coming back to town he basically stayed inebriated at all times and wanted to hang out with me whenever he could. He'd come over to my place after closing the bars down, and we'd often keep partying until morning. He would usually end up breaking down and crying to me about how he can't live with himself over what he did. He wouldn't give details. Night after night this would happen until he broke down again one night and told me he was paid a lot of money to do some bad things to bad people. He confessed that he was paid by someone in his dad's gang to burn someone's business down over a money dispute. Then he told me he killed a couple of guys who were thought to be molesting children. He said he was given a handgun and a shotgun and was paid $10,000 after each man was executed. More than 10 years later I still don't know if I believe him or not. After he came back he was so fucked up and depressed. If he was telling the truth it would make sense. He kept doing drugs and drinking until about 5 years ago when he had a heart attack at age 27. He quit using drugs and alcohol, but the damage was done. He suffered another heart attack 6 months later and died a few days after his 28th birthday. He was the funniest and kindest person that I've known, and I miss him. This was me while I was drunk just after high school. I was at a get together with a few friends. Obviously I got stoned and drunk. At the time I wasn't on any medication. I ended up going on a bad trip, drugs, and got in a really bad headspace. I had previously tried to take my life. Literally no one knew. I ended up with a rope burn on my neck and a week or two of shrugging my shoulders in my hoodie during classes. Anyways, I'm surrounded by the people closest to me, and I put my hand on my best friend's shoulder and told him. It got super quiet for 2 seconds before he hugged me, and then rest of the boys turned it to a group hug. I instantly went from suffering quietly and alone to realizing I had an entire circle in front of me that wants to know about my bullshit, because regardless of what it is, be it some girl, some dude having problems, or my headspace. P.S. Don't let your shit fester in your head. Talk your mind and tell your friends what's bothering you. You won't believe how fast they'd really to help you. Police officer arrived at a stabbing call as a backup unit and ended up transporting the suspect back to cells. He was extremely drunk/high. He started talking semi-coherently in the backseat of my PC, and I was mostly ignoring him. At one point he said something like, "And this isn't even the first time I've done this. She was so young," and then he started bawling. I flipped on my recorder surreptitiously to see if he would say any more, but he didn't. He just cried and cried. Intox confessions are generally useless anyway, and once he sobered up and spoke to his lawyer he denied having any knowledge. I talked to our major crimes guys, but don't think they did anything with it. I still wonder though, it wasn't bravado, that's for sure. I had a girl, who I had only met maybe a couple times before, confess to me that she purposely stopped taking the pill so she would get pregnant and trap her boyfriend into a relationship with her, since she stumbled upon some texts with a friend of his that he was planning on leaving. The kid at that point was already a year or two old, and they were engaged with the wedding coming up shortly. I didn't know either of them to really say anything, so I told my mutual friend about it that night before I left. The dude ended up thinking my friend was coming on to him somehow, even though she was there with her, so she promptly left the party and the couple got married and divorced eventually.